Thank you. Let's bring Paul Rieckhoff in on all of this, host of the Independent Americans podcast. He's also co-founder of American Veterans for Ukraine. I'll put the landmine issue aside for a moment, but as Kelly says, big picture, what's going on here with Biden on his way out? Seems to be trying to do all he can for Ukraine, and then you wonder what Trump does on his way in.
I think that's what he's doing. I think it's what he should do, is kind of drain the tank, get them everything that they possibly can in the next couple of months to try to allow them to press their advantage and gain whatever ground they can, with the eventuality that Trump may pull the plug, right? So it's kind of a race.
Could have done some of this earlier, right?
You know, Biden has been slow in responding to every request from Ukraine from the beginning. It's been this kind of crazy game of Mother May I, where they say, please give us F-16s, and he says, no, 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 and eventually gives them. Please give us ATACMS. He says, no, 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 and he eventually gives them. They've been asking for landmines for a long time, too. Ukraine is, I think, the most landmine country in the world, and these are defensive weapons. This is going to stop human waves, right, and large numbers of foot soldiers, which Russia has been throwing at the Ukrainian forces for a long time now, and could be augmented by North Korean troops, right? That's why they've got the North Korean assets being added, because they need bodies, right? Putin is throwing bodies at the Ukrainians, and this is a defensive measure, and I think a common sense measure to help Ukraine hold their lines.
Now, let me ask you the most important question of all before we get into any other details, is that what Putin said, I guess it was yesterday, about nukes. Do you think we're having a legitimate conversation about a threat of nuclear war? Because, I mean, technically what he said was, if Ukraine's doing basically what it's doing now, I could use my nukes. So how do you read that?
It's always a factor, right? But it's also something that Putin, I think, has used constantly to kind of wave around as a way to intimidate it. I mean, if he's going to do it, he's going to do it. He's kind of crazy, right? But the idea that he's going to do it now because they have landmines or because they have ATACMS is part of the game that I think Putin tries to play with the West to intimidate them. We've got to fight fire with fire here. And I think it's about time we kind of leveled the playing field and allowed Ukraine to have the same weapons that the Russians do without having their hands tied.
So it's interesting, too, is then we change presidents, right? President Trump comes in. General Wesley Clark was on the other day. I thought he made an interesting point, is that, you know, in a weird way, Biden might be giving Trump some negotiating leverage here. You know, these issues, he goes back to Putin and makes his point. I want to put up what the Russians were saying from Dmitry Peskov, the longtime spokesperson for Putin. He says the president, meaning Putin, has indeed repeatedly, or rather constantly, stated he's ready for contacts and for negotiations. And Putin, he says, has already said that some of the options of freezing this conflict will not work for us. So is there a negotiation to be had for Trump? And what do you think it looks like? As opposed to the criticism of Trump from Democrats to say, well, he's going to end the war by basically giving up or surrendering. But is there a negotiation?
I mean, Ukraine could have momentum by the time Trump gains office. But I think the question is, under what conditions? Yeah, Russia would love to negotiate right now and take parts of Ukraine. But will that require Ukraine to give up land in order to reach a peace deal? So I think Ukraine has been steady in saying they're open to negotiating a peace deal once the Russians leave Ukraine. I mean, it's got to be conditional. I think we have to imagine a situation where, you know, an enemy was holding Texas, and they said, yeah, we're happy to negotiate, but we're going to keep Texas. No, we would not be open to that until they left our land, and I think that's a reasonable position for Ukraine to be.
Yeah, it's a bit, whether they can do it or not without giving up any land, obviously, is the biggest question heading into this new administration. Let me get you on one more topic, and then we're going to take a break here. We talked about the president-elect's nominee a couple times, I think, when you were on for the Department of Defense, and Pete Hegseth. This is from the Wall Street Journal and their editorial page today about the sexual assault accusation that has come up surrounding Hegseth. They say press reports say the accusation took Mr. Trump's transition team by surprise, which might be a lesson about picking unvetted cabinet secretaries on a whim. That's what the Journal, normally relatively supportive of the president-elect, is saying. What do you think the future holds for the Hegseth nomination?
I think it's dicey. I mean, this is the risk with nominating a Fox News host who's never run for Congress, who's never run for Senate, who's never been up for public office, where a lot of this stuff would have probably come out along the campaign trail. I think it's also especially challenging because the military does have a military sexual assault problem, and Pete Hegseth has said he wants to pull women out of combat. So this is not giving him a good position to start with.
Lloyd Austin, by the way, the current secretary, came out supporting women today. He was asked about
I think that's important because the reality is our troops are already in combat, and women are in combat right now. They're in combat roles in places like Syria, where we fired rockets just a couple of days ago. So even if you supported this policy, you have to understand it would mean ripping women out of combat roles right now. And that would be incredibly disruptive and something Putin would love to see. Any kind of turbulence in our Pentagon while we're trying to augment our allies and cover our homeland is something our enemies are going to favor. So I think we have to have a reasonable expectation about stability here during all the other transition, all the other chaos that's going to happen. We want minimal chaos inside the Pentagon while we're trying to defend our homeland.
All right, Paul, we're going to talk to you later about another topic, so don't go too far. Now, Big board is back. Why? We still have some stories to tell, believe it or not, on our election, a big board. I want to go to the state of Texas. I'll explain in detail why in a moment, to look at a specific county in Texas, Starr County, Texas. Now, we don't talk about it a lot, but now we'll be talking about it because it's managed to get itself in the news all the way down there by the border. Little Starr County, Texas. Now, you say at first glance, all right, that's a Republican area, right? Donald Trump won it easily, 58 to 42. But here's the thing, not only the last election, but going back many elections, Republicans don't win here. See Biden 52-47 in 2020. It's the first time a Republican won Starr County, Texas, right along the southern border, since 1896. Went 128 years without winning in Starr County, Texas. Democrats had their streak broken by Trump. So why are we focused on this county today? Well, officials in Texas are offering President-elect Trump now a 14-acre ranch that's in Starr County to construct deportation facilities. This land recently was acquired by the Texas General Land Office. The land commissioner in the state says it could now be used for processing and detention as part of the Trump plan for mass deportations. Still a lot of questions about that plan, including the role the U.S. military might play. Trump has pledged to deploy the military as part of his crackdown. Earlier this week, Chad Wolf was on the show with us, the acting Homeland Security Secretary of the first Trump term, talking about what that might look like. Watch.
President Trump issued a national emergency along that border in 2018. So his team, it does have some experience with this. It's trying to get individuals down there so that you're telling the cartels, you're telling the smugglers, you're telling the other individuals coming across that border that it's not business as usual, right? And so you can have DOD assets and personnel helping to deploy physical infrastructure.
All right. Paul Rieckhoff is still here. We talked to you earlier about a different topic. I said you'd be back because I know you have some thoughts on this as a veteran and a veterans advocate yourself. What are they?
I think, it kind of reminds me of the last 20 years when lots of politicians and folks on TV said we should send troops into dangerous situations. And what I'm always reminded by is a quote that Ross Perot used to say. There should be a sign in front of the White House that says, commit the country first, then commit the troops. And the challenge that we've got is this is a very divisive issue. And if you send active duty troops or even National Guard troops into this situation, it's wrought with challenge, danger, and controversy.
Right.
And that's a very difficult position to put a young 19-year-old in, and with protesters, with media, with any number of challenges. So what I'd urge everybody to do is ask hard questions. Ask them to define the mission and be clear about exactly what it is you're asking our men and women to do here on the border, as you would if they were being deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan or anywhere else in harm's way.
Well, let me ask you this, because if the president-elect, when he becomes president, wants to carry out and do what he says he's going to do, this idea of mass deportations, just from a logistical point in terms of execution, you're going to need numbers, right? You need a lot of people. And to the point that's been made, you already have the National Guard down there, right? So in order for, if that's the mission, wouldn't you need soldiers to carry it out or no?
Well, you could. I mean, you could use law enforcement. You could recruit people to do this mission. But I think the important part to remember is there's not really a precedent for this, right? You look back to areas of controversy where there will undoubtedly be American protesters in the mix, right? Or at least nearby these camps and in these areas. So you think back to issues like Kent State. If you think back to even the Rodney King riots, where National Guard units were deployed into a very volatile situation.
Right.
And it's wrought with danger. So I think you have to think about what specifically are they going to do? Are they going to drive trucks? Are they going to feed people? Are they going to be asked to be, like I was, a military police officer? I was taught how to do checkpoints, taught how to do security checks. How deep are you going to put American troops in this very volatile issue that is wrought with danger and a lot of ticked off Americans who are not going to approve of this policy and are going to oppose it?
Interesting. That's an interesting take on things. We had Chad Wolf pretty much had a different opinion of it. He served with Trump the first time. So we'll keep talking about it. There's going to be plenty of time to talk about between now and when Trump takes office and then when they try to put it in motion. By the way, surprised at all that they don't have an agreement to get this Gates ethics report out? That was just...
I'm disappointed. I mean, this is an ethics committee run by the Republicans. And what I'm telling people is, look, integrity should be the #1 thing we ask for in nominees. And would you be okay with this guy as the principal of your kid's school? If you're not okay with him as the principal of your kid's school, why are you okay with him as Attorney General? And I think that's a standard we should try to think about in the next couple of weeks around all these nominees.
All right, Paul, thank you for all the time today. Paul Rieckhoff with us on that.